Last night, your soulmate broke down in tears. The reason will leave you stunned. Don't scroll, listen to this because this story might speak to a part of your heart that has been quietly searching for hope. Your heart needs this right now. My beloved child, imagine a peaceful night when the entire world seems to have fallen asleep, yet one person remains awake because their heart is carrying emotions too heavy to ignore. The streets are quiet. The lights inside most homes have gone dark. Even the wind outside seems softer than usual. But behind one window, someone sits alone, staring at the night sky, holding a memory they can no longer keep buried. This is a fictional story about love, healing, gratitude, and the courage to finally face emotions that have been hidden for far too long. Last night was different. It wasn't dramatic because of what happened around them. It was unforgettable because of what happened inside them. For months they had convinced themselves they were fine. They smiled during conversations, completed their daily routines, laughed at the right moments, and answered everyone's questions with calm confidence. Yet every evening, when the world became quiet enough for honesty to return, they found themselves thinking about one person again and again. They thought about your kindness, your patience, and the quiet way you had once encouraged them during a season when they had almost forgotten how to believe in themselves. Listen to this because this story is for you. My beloved child, sometimes the strongest hearts carry the deepest emotions in complete silence. They reached for an old box tucked away in the corner of a closet. It had remained unopened for years. Dust covered the lid, reminding them how much time had passed since they last looked inside. Slowly they lifted it open. There were photographs, small handwritten notes, old birthday cards, and tiny reminders of moments that once seemed ordinary but had somehow become priceless with time. One by one they picked up each memory. None of them were expensive. None of them were extraordinary to anyone else. Yet every single one carried a story. They smiled quietly while remembering conversations that had made difficult days feel lighter. They remembered moments when someone believed in them before they believed in themselves. They remembered laughter that had arrived at exactly the right time. My beloved child, they realized something that surprised them. The memories that stayed alive were never connected to grand gestures. They were connected to simple acts of kindness that had quietly changed the direction of their life. Don't scroll, your heart needs this right now because hidden beneath those keepsakes was a folded piece of paper they had completely forgotten. Curious, they unfolded it carefully. It was an old handwritten note. The ink had faded slightly, but every word remained readable. The first line immediately caught their attention: never forget that your kindness matters more than you realize. They stared at that sentence for several long moments. Suddenly another memory returned with incredible clarity. They remembered the day those words had first been written. They had been overwhelmed, discouraged, and convinced they were not strong enough to keep moving forward. Someone had quietly handed them that note with a gentle smile and no expectation of thanks. At the time they believed it was only a kind gesture. Last night they realized it had become one of the reasons they never completely gave up during life's hardest season. Listen to this because this story is for you. My beloved child, as they continued reading, tears slowly began filling their eyes. The note continued: one difficult chapter does not decide the ending of your story. Keep choosing hope. Keep choosing honesty. Keep choosing kindness, even when the world makes those choices feel difficult. Those simple sentences reached them differently now than they had years ago. Back then they offered comfort. Today they revealed truth. They suddenly understood that someone else's quiet encouragement had shaped countless decisions they later believed they had made entirely on their own. They whispered softly, I never thanked them properly." Those words echoed through the silent room. The tears they had held back for so long finally came. They were not tears of regret alone. They were tears of gratitude. They cried because they realized how many moments of goodness they had almost overlooked. They cried because life had moved so quickly that they had forgotten to appreciate the people who quietly helped them become stronger. They cried because they understood that the greatest gifts are often invisible while we are receiving them. My beloved child, gratitude sometimes arrives years after the kindness that first inspired it. Don't scroll. Your heart needs this right now because while sitting there with tears quietly falling, they began asking themselves questions they had avoided for years. When was the last time I told someone how much they changed my life? When was the last time I thanked the people who believed in me during my weakest moments? Have I become the kind of person who offers others the same hope that was once given to me? Those questions did not fill them with guilt. Instead, they awakened a desire to live differently from this day forward. As the night grew deeper, they found another small notebook resting beneath the old photographs. They opened it slowly. Most pages contained ordinary thoughts, little reminders, and plans for the future. Then one page stopped them completely. Across the top they had once written, "The kind of person I hope to become." Beneath the title were several simple promises. I want to encourage people before criticizing them. I want to listen before judging. I want to apologize quickly when I'm wrong. I want to protect another person's dignity. I want to become someone whose kindness remains steady even when life becomes difficult. Reading those promises broke their heart in the gentlest possible way. They realized they had forgotten many of the dreams they once carried for their own character. Listen to this because this story is for you. My beloved child, they closed the notebook and looked out the window. The stars filled the sky with quiet beauty. For the first time in years they did not ask for success, recognition, or easier circumstances. Instead, they whispered a simple prayer. Help me become the person I once hoped I would be. Help me never forget the people who lifted me when I could barely stand. Help me become a source of hope for someone else. Those words were followed by another wave of tears, not because they felt hopeless, but because they finally understood what truly mattered. Hours passed. The night slowly moved toward morning. Their tears eventually stopped, replaced by an unexpected feeling of peace. They picked up a pen and began writing letters they never intended to send immediately. Each one expressed gratitude. One thanked an old teacher. Another thanked a lifelong friend. Another thanked a family member who had quietly sacrificed more than anyone realized. Finally, they began writing one last letter. This one took the longest because every sentence came directly from the deepest place inside their heart. They wrote about the conversations that had changed them. They wrote about encouragement that had arrived exactly when they needed it. They wrote about learning that love is not always expressed through dramatic words but through steady loyalty, patient listening, and ordinary acts of compassion repeated over time. They admitted they had never fully understood the impact those moments would have until now. Every line became another reminder that genuine kindness leaves echoes long after the moment itself has passed. Don't scroll, your heart needs this right now because just before sunrise they placed the finished letter inside an envelope. On the front they wrote only one sentence: "Thank you for helping me become who I am today." They smiled softly through tired eyes because, for the first time in a long while, they no longer felt trapped by memories. They felt strengthened by them. They realized the tears they had shed were not a sign of weakness. They were evidence that gratitude had finally become stronger than silence. My beloved child, this fictional story reminds us that some of life's most powerful moments happen in complete privacy, where no audience is watching and no applause is waiting. Sometimes a single memory can soften a hardened heart. Sometimes an old handwritten note can restore hope. Sometimes tears are not the result of losing something precious but of finally recognizing how precious it always was. As the first rays of morning sunlight entered the room, they folded the notebook closed, placed the old keepsakes back inside the box, and carried only one thing with them into the new day. A quiet promise to live with greater honesty, deeper gratitude, and the same compassion that had once changed their own life. Yet one chapter still remains unwritten, because the letter they placed inside that envelope has not yet reached its destination. When it finally does, the response they receive will reveal a truth that neither of them expected, and it will change the future of this story forever. Don't scroll. Listen to this because this story is about to reveal why one letter can change an entire life. Your heart needs this right now. My beloved child, when the first light of morning slowly entered the room, your soulmate remained sitting beside the window, holding the envelope they had written only hours before. Their eyes were tired from the tears they had shed, but their heart felt lighter than it had in years. The silence that had once felt heavy now felt peaceful. They gently turned the envelope over in their hands, wondering whether they should send it at all. It wasn't fear of rejection that made them hesitate. It was the realization that some words become so meaningful they feel almost impossible to speak aloud. For years they had carried gratitude quietly, believing that people somehow already knew how much they were appreciated. Last night taught them something different. Gratitude that remains unspoken is a gift that never reaches the heart it was meant to encourage. Listen to this because this story is for you. My beloved child, sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is simply say, "Thank you for changing my life." They carefully opened the envelope one more time and began reading the letter from the beginning. Every sentence brought another memory back to life. They wrote about the day someone encouraged them after they had almost given up on a lifelong dream. They remembered a quiet conversation that lasted only a few minutes but somehow stayed with them for years. They described the comfort they felt knowing that someone had listened without trying to judge or immediately solve every problem. They admitted something they had never confessed before. I don't think you ever realized how many times your simple words became the reason I kept moving forward. As those lines echoed through the room, fresh tears quietly filled their eyes. They realized that genuine kindness often has consequences far beyond the moment in which it is offered. Don't scroll, your heart needs this right now because just before sealing the envelope again, they noticed one empty space at the bottom of the final page. For several moments they stared at it, wondering whether anything else needed to be said. Finally they picked up the pen and slowly wrote one last paragraph. Life has taken us through different seasons, different responsibilities, and different paths. I cannot change yesterday, and I do not wish to. I simply want you to know that your kindness became part of the person I am today. If I have ever encouraged someone else, listened with patience, or offered hope during a difficult moment, a part of that began with what you once gave to me. After finishing those words, they folded the letter carefully and sealed the envelope with a peaceful smile. Listen to this because this story is for you. My beloved child, later that afternoon they visited the small neighborhood post office. It was an ordinary place where people mailed birthday cards, family photographs, and everyday packages. Yet to your soulmate, it felt like the beginning of something extraordinary. As they placed the envelope into the mailbox, they whispered softly, "No matter what happens next, I'm grateful these words finally exist outside my heart." They turned away expecting to feel uncertainty, but instead they felt relief. The truth had finally been spoken. The outcome no longer belonged to fear. It belonged to time. Days passed quietly. Life returned to its familiar rhythm. They went to work, spent time with family, completed ordinary responsibilities, and tried not to think constantly about the letter. Yet every evening, as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, they found themselves wondering whether it had arrived. They never expected an immediate answer. In truth, they didn't even know if one would come. They had not written the letter to receive anything in return. They had written it because gratitude deserved to be expressed while there was still time. Don't scroll, your heart needs this right now, because nearly a week later something unexpected happened. Their phone vibrated with a message from an unfamiliar number. For a brief moment they considered ignoring it, assuming it was another ordinary notification. Instead, they opened it. The message contained only one sentence: "I received your letter, and I think we need to talk." Their heart immediately began beating faster. They stared at those words again and again, unsure what to feel. There was no anger. There was no excitement. Only quiet sincerity. They replied with a simple message: "Whenever you're ready. Listen to this because this story is for you. My beloved child." The meeting was arranged for the following afternoon at a peaceful park where tall trees shaded quiet walking paths. When they arrived, they noticed the other person already sitting on a bench, holding the very envelope they had mailed. For several moments neither of them spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people carefully choosing words that truly mattered. Finally the letter was gently placed on the bench between them. "I've read this 3 times, the other person said softly. "Each time I cried for a different reason." Your soulmate lowered their eyes, unsure how to respond. The other person smiled gently before continuing. "Do you know what surprised me the most? Not the gratitude. It was discovering that small moments I barely remembered became some of the most important moments of your life." Those words completely changed the atmosphere. They suddenly realized something extraordinary. The conversations they believed had been ordinary had never been ordinary at all. A few kind words spoken without expecting anything in return had quietly become turning points in another person's story. My beloved child, they spent hours talking that afternoon. They did not try to rewrite the past. They did not speak with regret or blame. Instead, they reflected upon everything they had learned through the years. They laughed about old memories. They thanked one another for lessons that had shaped their character. They admitted mistakes with humility and celebrated growth without pretending either of them had lived a perfect life. It became one of the most peaceful conversations either of them had ever experienced. Perhaps recently you have remembered someone who quietly encouraged you during a difficult season. My beloved child, never underestimate the value of expressing appreciation while you still have the opportunity. A sincere thank you may become the encouragement another heart has been waiting to receive. Don't scroll. Your heart needs this right now, because as the afternoon came to an end, the other person reached into a small bag and removed something unexpected. It was an old folded note, carefully preserved despite the passing years. Smiling through tears, they handed it across the bench. "There's something you never knew," they whispered. "The day I gave you that little note of encouragement, I had almost given up myself. I wrote those words because I needed to believe them too." Your soulmate looked up in complete surprise. They had always believed they were the only one being helped that day. The other person continued quietly. "What you never realized is that your determination inspired me just as much as my words encouraged you. We were both helping each other without even knowing it." Tears once again filled your soulmate's eyes because they finally understood that hope has a remarkable way of traveling in both directions. Sometimes the people we believe are rescuing us are quietly finding strength through us as well. My beloved child, as they prepared to leave, they hugged briefly, not as people trying to return to yesterday, but as two individuals deeply grateful for the role they had played in each other's growth. Walking away, your soulmate no longer carried unanswered questions. They carried peace. They realized the tears from last night had never been about loss. They had been about finally recognizing how deeply one person's kindness had shaped another life. But, my beloved child, this story has not yet revealed its greatest surprise. As your soulmate returned home that evening, they discovered another envelope waiting at their door. There was no return address. Across the front, written in familiar handwriting, were the words, "There is one truth I could never fit inside our conversation." Their hands began trembling once again because they sensed this final letter contained a revelation that would transform everything they believed they already understood about that unforgettable night, those tears, and the quiet connection that had changed both of their lives forever. Don't scroll. Listen to this because this story is about to reveal the one truth that neither of them expected to hear. Your heart needs this right now. My beloved child, as your soulmate stood at the front door holding the second envelope, their hands trembled with a mixture of curiosity and quiet anticipation. They had already experienced one of the most emotional nights of their life. They had cried tears they had held back for years. They had written a letter they never believed they would have the courage to send. They had spoken words of gratitude that had remained locked inside their heart for far too long. They believed that chapter had finally reached its peaceful ending. Yet now another envelope rested in their hands, carrying a message written in familiar handwriting. It felt as though life was gently whispering, "There is still one lesson you haven't discovered." They carried the envelope inside, placed it carefully on the table, and sat in complete silence. They didn't rush to open it. Some moments deserve to be approached slowly because they have the power to change everything that follows. Listen to this because this story is for you. My beloved child, after taking a deep breath, they carefully unfolded the letter. The first sentence immediately caught their attention. If you're reading this, then thank you for having the courage to send your letter first. Those simple words immediately brought a gentle smile to their face. They continued reading. There were many times I wanted to thank you too, but I never knew whether my words would matter. I thought perhaps you had already forgotten the small moments we shared. I convinced myself that life had moved on for both of us. Your letter reminded me that kindness has a much longer memory than we often realize. As they read those lines, their eyes slowly filled with tears once again. They had believed they were the only one carrying gratitude all these years. They now realized both hearts had quietly been thankful, each believing the other had already forgotten. Don't scroll. Your heart needs this right now because the letter continued with a confession that completely surprised them. Do you remember the day you thought I encouraged you? It asked. The truth is, I almost canceled our meeting that day because I was struggling more than anyone knew. I smiled because I didn't want anyone to worry. I encouraged you because speaking hope out loud helped me believe it myself. What I never told you is that after our conversation ended, I went home feeling stronger because I had seen your determination. Watching you keep moving forward reminded me that I could do the same. Your soulmate stopped reading and quietly covered their eyes. They had carried one version of that memory for years, believing they had been the only person receiving strength. Now they understood something extraordinary. Hope had quietly traveled in both directions. Two people had unknowingly been helping one another survive difficult seasons. Listen to this because this story is for you. My beloved child, they continued reading every line with complete attention. Life has a strange way of convincing us that we are walking through difficult seasons alone, the letter said. But sometimes two people are quietly carrying one another without ever realizing it. Every encouraging word you spoke to me mattered. Every time you chose honesty instead of pretending everything was fine, you gave me permission to be honest too. Every time you refused to give up, I found another reason to keep believing. Those words settled deeply inside your soulmate's heart. They realized that genuine encouragement is never one-sided. It creates a circle of hope that often continues far beyond the moment in which it begins. My beloved child, they reached the final page of the letter and discovered something folded inside it. It was an old photograph taken years earlier. They smiled immediately because they remembered the day. It had been completely ordinary. There had been no celebration, no dramatic event, and nothing that seemed important at the time. Yet everyone in the photograph was smiling naturally. Looking at the picture now, they understood why it had been included. Beneath the photograph someone had written, "The moments we think are ordinary often become the memories we treasure most." Tears quietly rolled down their face because they finally understood how true those words were. Don't scroll. Your heart needs this right now because after reading the letter one final time, your soulmate looked around the quiet room and reflected on the past few days. They realized that the tears they shed that unforgettable night had never been caused by sadness alone. They had cried because gratitude had finally become impossible to ignore. They had cried because they recognized that their life had been shaped by countless acts of kindness they had once considered too small to matter. They had cried because they understood that one sincere conversation can quietly influence years of another person's future. Perhaps recently you have remembered someone whose encouragement helped you through a difficult chapter. My beloved child, we often underestimate the value of our words because we rarely witness the full impact they have. A thoughtful conversation, a patient listener, a sincere compliment, or a simple reminder that someone is not alone can remain in another person's heart for years. The greatest gifts are often impossible to measure. Listen to this because this story is for you. The following morning your soulmate made another quiet decision. They purchased a new notebook, not to write about regrets, but to record moments of gratitude. On the first page they wrote, "People who changed my life." Beneath the title they listed family members, old friends, teachers, mentors, and people whose names they barely remembered but whose kindness they would never forget. Next to each name they wrote one lesson they had learned. One taught patience. Another taught forgiveness. Someone else taught courage. And beside the name connected to those unforgettable letters they wrote only 3 words: hope became contagious. As the days passed, they began living differently. They thanked people more often. They listened more carefully. They stopped assuming that others already knew how much they were appreciated. They discovered that expressing gratitude did not weaken them. It strengthened every relationship around them. Family members noticed the difference. Friends commented that they seemed calmer. Even strangers experienced a little more patience from someone who had finally learned that kindness multiplies whenever it is shared. Don't scroll. Your heart needs this right now because one evening, while watching the sunset from a quiet park bench, they unfolded both letters and read them side by side. The first expressed gratitude received. The second revealed gratitude returned. Looking at them together, they smiled peacefully. Neither letter had changed the past. Neither had erased life's difficult chapters. But together they had transformed the way the past would be remembered. What once felt like unfinished conversations had become lasting reminders that genuine compassion never disappears. My beloved child, just before placing the letters safely inside the notebook, your soulmate wrote one final promise beneath them: if someone has ever brought light into my life, I will never again assume they already know. I will tell them while I still can. They closed the notebook gently and looked toward the evening sky with quiet gratitude. Yet, my beloved child, one final chapter still waits beyond the horizon. The story of those tears is complete, but the journey they inspired has only begun. Very soon your soulmate will unexpectedly meet someone who has been carrying one of those same handwritten notes for years without knowing who first wrote it. That remarkable discovery will reveal how one simple act of encouragement quietly traveled from heart to heart, changing lives far beyond anything either of them could have imagined, proving that genuine kindness never truly ends. It simply continues its journey through the people who choose to pass it on. Don't scroll. Listen to this, because this story has reached the chapter where every tear finally finds its purpose. Your heart needs this right now. My beloved child, several weeks had passed since that unforgettable night when your soulmate sat alone beneath the stars and allowed years of hidden gratitude to flow through quiet tears. Life had returned to its ordinary rhythm, yet something inside them had changed forever. They no longer hurried through conversations. They no longer assumed people already knew how much they were appreciated. They had discovered that love is not measured only by grand declarations. It is revealed through ordinary moments when someone chooses to notice another person's value before time quietly slips away. Every morning they carried the notebook with them, not because they needed to remember the past, but because they wanted the lessons of the past to shape the future. Listen to this, because this story is for you. My beloved child, one peaceful Saturday afternoon they visited a local community center where volunteers gathered to mentor young people preparing for new chapters in their lives. They had not planned to speak. They only intended to help quietly for a few hours. As they walked through the building, they noticed a small bulletin board covered with handwritten messages from people who had been encouraged there over the years. Some notes thanked teachers. Others thanked parents, friends, and strangers whose kindness had arrived at exactly the right moment. Then something stopped them completely. One small card pinned near the center of the board contained a sentence they recognized immediately: "Never forget that your kindness matters more than you realize." Their hearts skipped a beat. They stepped closer, reading the words again and again. They knew that sentence. It had been written inside the letter that had changed everything. They quietly asked one of the volunteers where the message had come from. The volunteer smiled warmly and replied, "Years ago someone visited here and wrote several encouraging notes for anyone who needed hope. We never knew their full story. We only know that many people carried those words with them long after leaving this place." Your soulmate stood in complete silence. They realized the encouragement they thought had been meant only for one person had quietly reached countless others. Don't scroll. Your heart needs this right now, because while they were standing there, a young man approached the board and gently touched the same note. He smiled before saying to no one in particular, "This sentence helped me through one of the hardest seasons of my life." Your soulmate looked at him with quiet curiosity. The young man continued, "I almost gave up on my education after losing confidence in myself. Then I saw these words on this board. I don't know who wrote them, but I decided to keep trying. Today I'm graduating next month." My beloved child, your soulmate felt tears quietly filling their eyes again. They finally understood that kindness never belongs only to the moment in which it is given. It continues traveling through lives we may never meet. Listen to this, because this story is for you. As the afternoon continued, more people shared similar stories. One woman explained that a short conversation with an encouraging volunteer years earlier had inspired her to reconnect with her family after a long misunderstanding. Another quietly admitted that one simple sentence had reminded him to ask for help during a difficult season instead of suffering alone. Every story carried the same message. Hope multiplies when it is shared. Compassion grows stronger when it is passed from one heart to another. Your soulmate no longer wondered why they had cried that unforgettable night. They now understood that tears of gratitude often become the beginning of a life lived with greater purpose. Later that evening they returned home, placed the notebook on the table, and opened it to the final blank page. For several moments they simply looked at the empty space before beginning to write. They did not record another memory. They did not describe another regret. Instead they wrote a new commitment. I will never assume that small acts of kindness are too small to matter. I will encourage people while I still have the opportunity. I will speak appreciation before silence has the chance to become regret. I will remember that every person I meet may be carrying a burden I cannot see. I will choose compassion even when no one notices. When they finished writing, they smiled peacefully because they realized those promises no longer belonged only on paper. They had already begun living them. Don't scroll, your heart needs this right now because the next morning something unexpected happened. There was a gentle knock at the front door. Standing outside was the same person who had written the second letter. They were holding a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. After exchanging warm smiles, they quietly handed it over. I found something that belongs with your notebook, they said. Inside the package was an old fountain pen along with a folded note. The note read, "This pen has written letters of encouragement for many years. I think it's your turn now. Keep writing words that remind people they are stronger than their hardest days." Your soulmate held the pen carefully, almost as if it carried the weight of every kind word that had ever been written with it. They looked up with grateful eyes and whispered, "I don't know if I can change someone's life the way mine was changed." The answer came gently. You don't have to change everyone's life. Just don't miss the opportunity to brighten the life that's in front of you today. My beloved child, those simple words became the final lesson of the journey. Listen to this because this story is for you. Weeks turned into months. The notebook slowly filled with new pages. Not of sadness, but of gratitude. Sometimes they wrote letters that were mailed. Sometimes they wrote notes that were quietly left where someone might need encouragement. Sometimes they simply thanked people face to face instead of assuming there would always be another tomorrow. They discovered that appreciation expressed today carries far more power than appreciation postponed until someday. Family members noticed the quiet transformation. Friends commented that conversations with them somehow always left people feeling lighter. Colleagues appreciated the patience they brought into stressful situations. They had not become a different person overnight. They had simply become more intentional about living the values they had always admired. Don't scroll, your heart needs this right now because this is the true reason the tears from that unforgettable night mattered so deeply. They were never tears of defeat. They were never tears of hopelessness. They were the tears of someone who finally realized that the greatest wealth in life is not measured by achievements, possessions, or recognition. It is measured by the lives gently touched through honesty, gratitude, kindness, and compassion. My beloved child, every chapter of this fictional story has quietly pointed toward the same truth. We often spend years searching for extraordinary moments while overlooking the extraordinary power hidden inside ordinary choices. A sincere thank you. A patient conversation. A handwritten note. A listening ear. A few encouraging words spoken at exactly the right time. Those simple gifts often become the memories people carry long after everything else has faded. As the final evening of this story arrived, your soulmate stepped outside once more beneath the familiar stars. This time there were no unanswered questions, no hidden regrets, and no tears of uncertainty. Only gratitude remained. Looking toward the quiet sky, they smiled and whispered, "Thank you for every person who believed in me before I believed in myself. Help me become that person for someone else." With those words, they gently closed the notebook one final time. Not because the story had ended, but because it no longer needed to be written on paper. From that day forward, it would be written through everyday acts of kindness, quiet courage, honest conversations, and grateful hearts. And that, my beloved child, became the real ending, not the night they broke down in tears, but the morning they chose to turn those tears into a lifetime of compassion, proving that the most beautiful legacy anyone can leave behind is not found in what they achieve, but in how deeply they encourage others to keep believing, keep hoping, and keep moving forward.